Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Wrap, brought to you by Michigan Medicine Headlines. I'm Dan Ellman with the Department of Communication.
And I'm Bailey Merzick, also with the Department of Communication. Today, we're bringing you another episode of The Wrap that is part of our Caregiving on the Frontline series, giving you tips and tools that will help you in both your professional and personal lives.
Now, before we get into today's important conversation, be sure you go back and find some of the important episodes of The Wrap you may have missed. You can find the shows on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or any other podcast hosting platform. New episodes are also hosted on the Michigan Medicine YouTube channel and as part of the Headlines Week in Review.
And with that, let's bring in Dr. Amy Cohn, the organization's Chief Transformation Officer. Amy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
First, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, and your role here at Michigan Medicine?
Sure. Thanks, Dan, and thanks, Bailey, for having me. My role is a little unusual at Michigan Medicine, so let me maybe start with a little bit of my history. I'm actually a professor of engineering. I started my career in the trucking industry. Spent a lot of my time before grad school and then during my PhD working on how to make airlines run better. So people typically blame me when their flights get canceled or delayed, but it's been about 20 years, so it's not my fault anymore. But I've always been interested in working in large, complex systems. And so my job at Michigan Medicine as Chief Transformation Officer is really kind of merging my engineering skills and background and looking at large, complex, messy systems. So I tend to get involved in big new problems, things like setting up COVID testing or vaccine centers, or looking at burnout and how across the Institute we can try to figure out ways to bring lots of different people together to solve problems. So I spend a lot of my time, of course, at Michigan Medicine. I engage students a lot in that work. I teach both at the undergrad level, but I also bring in students from nursing and public health and engineering to work together. And then perhaps most relevant to today's conversation, I have two boys, or actually two young men, I guess. Tommy just finished his undergrad at Michigan, studying math and computer science and playing cymbals in the marching band. So he was the guy who did the somersaults on his cymbals. And he's now in a PhD program. And my younger son, Peter, just graduated from Skyline High School here in Ann Arbor and started at Michigan also. He is studying flute performance and composition. And he is also in the marching band playing piccolo.
So that was a great introduction about your children. So can you maybe tell us the process of getting your kids ready to launch for college and beyond college?
Yeah, that's a great question, one that I've spent a lot of time on, and I've talked to a lot of friends. It's a really challenging time. Let me start with the easier one to some extent, which is my older son. So for Tommy, I think growing up as a faculty brat on a college campus was mainly a really good thing. I'm sure he had a few things he would do differently, but I think he was the type of kid who really loved coming to campus with me on snow days, being the little guy around my graduate students, kind of absorbing it. I teach on the engineering campus, and he's a real robotics kind of a kid. And so for him, this was like his place. And we were lucky, I think, in a lot of ways, in that he was a kid who had a really clear sense of what he wanted. He really loved math and science. Michigan is a great place to do those things. He really loved being in a marching band. Michigan's a great place to do those things. He's kind of a homebody, and so the idea of going to college 2 or 3 miles away wasn't a problem for him. And so the process of going through the college application stuff with him was actually pretty easy. We kind of let him do his thing, and we just kind of, we got lucky. The interesting thing with Tommy that I wasn't prepared for is the transition itself, I think, was tough. Probably no tougher than usual, and I should have been expecting it, but we had this smooth sailing of a pretty easy senior year, no fights about his applications, no fights about his, getting the college stuff done. And then, and forgive me, Tommy, if you're watching this at some point, but I'm going to be honest about both of us. We really butted heads that last summer. So we've had a great relationship through high school, really lucky. College application went really well. And it's now the summer before high school. And all of a sudden we were just butting heads. And I would go to my husband and say, like, what's with Tommy? And he would very kind of calmly say, well, it's maybe not just Tommy, it's maybe you too. And looking back, Tommy was really starting to establish his independence. And we had been so close doing, really similar things for a long time that all of a sudden he was like, but I want to be independent. And on top of that, I think there was some underlying fear for him about being independent. And the way that fear manifested himself was trying to be more independent. So I'll never forget, we moved him off to college and I was ready, like the teary Hallmark farewell, wonderful scene. And he was like, I gotta go. And in retrospect, he was really nervous about band auditions. And he was like, guys, like, I gotta go, leave me alone, I'm out of here. And I kind of went, and I can remember him saying, like, I need to go away to college. So I'm going to go to the University of Michigan, but I'm away at college. And at some point he called and wanted some stuff he forgot. And so I drove over with his younger brother, and I sat in the parking lot in the car for about 45 minutes, kind of, trying not to cry, while his brother brought the stuff up and then met all of the roommates and the guys on the hall and played video games. Looking back, that was exactly what it should have been, right? He needed to establish his independence. He needed his space from us. He needed to know that we were there if he needed something, but it had to be on his terms. And so looking back on that, I think it made it a lot easier when his younger brother went away to school. That for his younger brother, I was sort of like, I'll see you at Thanksgiving. And Peter was like, well, or, maybe I'll want you to take me grocery shopping. I'd say, well, I can lend you the car, or you could, take me grocery shopping. I think because I was putting it on Peter's terms, he was much more comfortable, I think, having us engage in his life. But for him, the college application process was a lot harder. And I think some of that was COVID. He had spent, a good chunk of high school in lockdown. And I'll be candid, we're in an environment here where there's just a lot of pressure on kids. There's a lot of pressure, and there's a lot of confusion about college applications. There's the question of, should we be going? I think in Ann Arbor, for example, there's this expectation that you go to high school and you take your SATs and you do your AP classes and you go off to college. And the reality is there are plenty of kids who are much better off taking a gap year, or much better off doing 2 years of community college and then transferring into a 4-year program, or going into a trade program. I think for us, we knew with Peter to just sit back and kind of watch how he wanted to explore this. And in his case, he did something totally different than his brother or his parents, and he started applying to music programs, and we had no idea of what that looked like. So I think that, looking back, if I could do things differently, the only thing that I would probably do differently is just relax a little bit more and kind of let them find their way, and really believe in them in terms of, you're going to make a good decision. And even if you don't make the right, perfect decision, you can change things. People change degrees, they change majors, they change schools, they decide not to go to school, they decide to go back to school. The best advice I got from somebody early on in this process was, they said, you're going to hear a lot about how to raise a kid to go to the best college, and what should you do so that they get into the best college. There's so many great options for kids. Raise a kid who's going to make whatever college or not college, whatever path they take, the best for them. Raise kids who are flexible and curious and excited and able to ask for help. And so, I have the good fortune of having 2 really great kids, and they have a really great dad. And at the end of the day, we needed to just trust them and relax a little bit, and know that the most important thing was that they were happy and healthy, and that they could ask for help when they needed it.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. The biggest thing to me is making sure that and that your kids know that the decision they're making at 18 or at 20 about their major or where they're going to school doesn't have to be a lifelong decision, right? Like, I never thought I would get into healthcare or in the healthcare industry, but here I am and I love it. But I always thought I'd be a broadcaster growing up, and I know so many people, you might go for music and then join, then go to a med school afterwards.
Yes.
There's so many things, like at 18, you might have no idea what you want to get into. So I think that's great advice. So now my question for you is following up on that. Now you're an empty nester, right? You got 2 kids at school or beyond. What would you say is the most surprising thing you have felt as a new empty nester? Was there sort of anything that caught you off guard in terms of your feelings or emotions?
Yeah, unfortunately, what caught me off guard is just as my kids were both, I mean, literally within, the 2-week span that both of my kids moved away, my dad got ill, and I suddenly transitioned into being a different kind of caretaker. And I think this is a reality that a lot of us face, that we think about these phases of our lives. There's that phase where you're, in school or developing a career. There's that phase where you're, sort of focused on your work. There's that phase where you have kids. There's that phase where you're taking care of parents or other family members. And what I didn't expect was for them to bleed together quite so much. So I think I sort of thought that the kids would go away to college and we would start traveling and doing things as a couple that we hadn't done a lot of. And instead it was sort of like, okay, who's going which way and who's taking care of what? And I suspect it has probably put me in a position of kind of postponing that shock of, wait a minute, they're gone. My husband and I both noticed that periodically we'll think we hear them, or we'll sort of like, oh, in any minute, Peter's going to come clomping up the stairs, looking for coffee, getting ready to go out the door. And I kind of forget that they're gone. One of the things that I'm discovering is that I have a different kind of connection with them that I really enjoy. Especially for my older son, Tommy's a real grown-up. He has an apartment and he and his girlfriend go grocery shopping and cook dinner, and he's got his lab. And so I don't see as much of him. I don't spend as much time with him, but the time that I have is really kind of adult time, right? So it's him calling to check up on his grandfather, and it's him telling me about the paper that he's working on writing, or asking my opinion of something in the news. And so it's a different relationship. I feel okay that I don't have as much time with him because I'm pretty busy right now too. But I know that he's doing well, and it's been really nice to have him. He'll give us a quick call as he's walking to get the bus to his lab, or he'll shoot us a quick text about something. With Peter, the younger one, I think it's a little bit more of an adjustment in the sense that I'm not driving him to school in the morning, and I'm not, yelling at him to get his dirty laundry off the floor, kind of a thing. But I think what also happens is you do start having more transition before that. So Peter actually really helped us, I think, to prepare for that empty nest, in the sense that he was very explicit and direct in, say, pretty much his senior year, and certainly the end of his senior year in the summer before he left, to say, I'm going to be out of the house. I'm going to be a grown up, I'm going to have responsibility for my own time and schedule. Can we start doing more of that now? And so we spent a lot of time negotiating things like curfews and how much information we had to have. He said, I don't necessarily want to tell you every time I'm going out exactly where I'm going, who I'm with, when I'm going to be back. And we realized we're not going to have that information in 3 months. So for him, I really didn't think he was doing anything I needed to worry about. He just wanted that feeling of, I'm making my own choices and I'm responsible for it. And so I think he prepared himself and us for that feeling of, I don't know where he is right now, and that's okay. But I think social media and texting and all of those things are great, because when I was in college, I would call my parents on Sunday night. There would be sort of a set 7:30, you'd hear from me and we'd have our chat, and that was kind of it. I got a text from Peter saying, I'll probably get in trouble for this, but I'll say it anyway, that he was in class and he was liking class, but he was more interested in the girl in front of him was watching the Queen's corgis right after the funeral and the discussion. And he was like texting me about all of his thoughts about the Queen's corgis. And it was just this little thing for a minute. And then it was like he went back to class and, it was fine. But having those little moments for me has really helped to not feel like there's a big empty hole.
So knowing how this journey has gone for you so far, what advice do you have for parents who are maybe going to become empty nesters or have recently become empty nesters?
Spoil yourself. Right? Like at some point I made the connection that, we're paying for college, which is huge, and we have expenses associated with this new phase, but our grocery bill is like plummeted. And we're not putting as many miles on the car and all of these things. And so I am trying to be very conscious about, okay, what does the next phase of life look like? I think about my parents who my entire quote adult life, they were empty nesters. That's a long time. And so I have been really thoughtful about how my husband and I interact, the sort of negotiation of who's driving who, where, who's taking care of what school activities, all of the sort of parts of your relationship with a partner when you co-parent is largely driven around your kids. And so all of a sudden your relationship changes. And I think it does require thinking about it. It gets much easier for the house to get quiet. It gets much easier for you to sort of go your separate ways if you're not thinking about it. And on the other hand, for us, it used to be, I was sort of the morning person. And so I'd get up really early and I'd get kids off to school and I'd do the driving and whatever. And he was a night owl. And so he'd be the one, if they got home late from a rehearsal, he'd be having dinner with them, or if they were out with friends, he'd be there when they got home. And so those dynamics were all kind of shifting. And so we've started making kind of very conscientious plans about, one night a week, we're going to actually cook together and sit down at the table and not have the TV on and not be working and do things together. But we've also gotten really conscientious about tonight he's working late and I'm getting together with a friend and going out and having dinner, in part because then you come back and have things to be talking about and have things to share. And we're really good about keeping each other updated on the kids, which I think has been important, because going back to this point of it's not the two of us on one phone call with them once a week, trying to remember about, oh, by the way, I got a text from Tommy today saying he's going to come home from the Michigan State game. And, can we plan to have a family meal on Sunday? Or, oh, Peter sounded a little blue about something going on. And if you're going to be near that part of campus, maybe you can drop something off. So we try and kind of make sure we're both on the same page. But I think we're excited. I think we're not only excited about investing our time and resources in things that are not just focused around the boys, but also really getting to enjoy what their new experiences are. And so, I think for people with the empty nest, when your kids are out of state, the thought that, hey, we could possibly make a visit to them, but it's not just seeing them, it's let's go to Chicago and have a weekend in Chicago, and we'll take them out to dinner, but we'll also do stuff on our own. Or let's drive to, Nashville and meet up with them and see what they're doing, but also have some new things. For me, I'm starting to think about a lot of my friends are friends that I've built through the boys, the kids that they're classmates whose parents you get to know. And some of those relationships have been strong for 20 years and are great. And some of them are people that you enjoyed at the time and you just don't quite have as much in common in, you don't have as much sort of time to share. And so I think the other thing is for me thinking about, okay, I'm 52. What does it mean to make friends when you're 52? And I've discovered that actually, in part because my work has changed, I'm exposed to new people and people who also have more time because they're not driving to school and doing afternoon rehearsals. And it's been kind of fun building some new friendships, some new relationships, some new hobbies, and really trying to make time for myself. I think that's where all of this started is we are, I have a demanding job that I really value and I take seriously. That job also means mentoring a lot of people in terms of students and younger coworkers. I'm caring for my kids, I'm caring for my parents, I'm caring for my spouse. And how do you say, okay, wait a minute, the tank is empty. And empty nest to me means a little bit of pause to say, if I'm going to take care of all these people, I got to take care of myself. And so keep coming back to this being conscientious and thoughtful about, I'm going to feel some sadness about my dad being ill and my parents aging. Maybe this is the time where I give a little bit less to my friends who have been great, or to my kids who've been supportive, or to my husband, and I say, or to my job. And frankly, the people I work with have been great about saying, work remotely if you need to, talk to people about what you're going through. I think making those choices and being honest with yourself about, I was a parent for a long time. I had little kids for a long time. And this is a different phase, and that's okay. But make choices about that phase.
I think that advice can probably go for really any stage of life somebody's in. When you're entering a new stage, just be intentional, right? It could be the first time you move in with a significant other. Things are going to change. So be intentional about how you're now going to spend your time. Then are you going to have kids? All right, be intentional about how you're going to share that relationship. Okay, now the kids are moving away. Now we're caring for parents. Would you say that that's pretty much, you kind of have to really think ahead and be intentional when your life changes in such dramatic ways?
Oh, absolutely. And even that, giving yourself space to feel things that are different than what you expected to feel. You asked this question about, what did you feel and how are you adjusting to this empty nest? And there have been a lot of things that I expected to feel and didn't. And then a month later kind of hits me that, oh, wait a minute, going away to college means potentially not moving home this summer. Or maybe that means not traveling with us over Thanksgiving. And communicating about it. I think the difference for me with the empty nest is that each of those phases that you talked about, you develop some skills. And so I look back at some of the mistakes my husband and I made when we were first married, right? And they were based largely on really communicating with each other and understanding each other. And so, we think about things that you fight about in a relationship, and usually they come down to, we didn't give each other the opportunity to really share what we wanted and what was important to us. And so I think the good news about, this empty nesting phase and this parenting your parents phase is that I've got some skills that I didn't have before. And so one of the biggest skills is realizing that it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to say to a colleague or a superior, or actually I've learned it's really okay to say to one of my students or one of my staff, hey, I'm really struggling this week. And that the grace that they have given me and that support has been hugely helpful. But it's also invaluable to be passing that down, right? So when I am falling apart at work and kind of losing it because something's blown up and I'm just struggling and I share that with them, they realize that it's okay for them to sometimes come in and say, you know what, there's something going on independent of my work, but it's affecting my work. And I need to share that and be, in a safe place to share that. And so often in our own minds, oh my God, I've done a terrible job this week. I've been a complete disaster and I'm not getting things done and everybody knows it. It's larger than life in your own head. And if you were to ask somebody, they might say, oh yeah, come to think of it, you usually answer those emails within 5 minutes and it took you 6. But so I think for us all to be supporting the people around us to say, this is a weird world right now. There's COVID, there's racism, there's the Ukraine, there's your own personal family issues, your own personal financial issues. Everyone I've talked to and said, hey, I'm sorry, I've been dropping some balls lately, I'm dealing with a lot, has said, I understand, I support you, I'm here to help. And oh, by the way, here's the stuff I'm dealing with and the balls that I'm dropping. And so, I think we need to be comfortable sharing some of those things with each other.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much, Amy, for sharing your insight. These are all topics that we don't often talk about as an organization. So I'm really glad we're able to bring it to light and hopefully help those who really need it and who are struggling or dropping balls that they didn't think they would be dropping, and let them know that it's okay, and I think this is an important conversation to have.
Thanks so much, Bailey. Thanks, Dan.
Okay, so you answered some questions that you were able to see in advance. Now you're going to answer some that
I forgot about this part.
as part of the
All right,
lightning
I'm ready.
round.
Bring it on.
Okay.
All right, here we go. So your job title is Chief Transformation Officer. I don't want to get you in trouble, but you've been very candid so far, so I'm looking forward to this answer. If you could change one thing about healthcare or the organization as a whole with just a snap of your fingers, what would it be?
Oh, Lord, that's a long list. I think the first thing off the top of my head would be to find ways for us to be more holistic in our care, to not think about treating an illness or a single acute event, but a person. And I think we're trying to do that, but the system is just nationally not set up for us to really treat patients as whole people.
Okay. If you could transform your career and do something besides what you're doing right now, what would it be and why?
That's a really tough one because I love my job. So yeah, I love my job. But I think if I were going to take like a sabbatical and do something really totally different, but actually not all that totally different, I think I'd love to spend a year at like the American Red Cross or FEMA or disaster relief. I really like complicated, messy problems, and sort of like you just got to get it done. You don't have a lot of time to think and try and do it perfect. You just got to dive in. So at some point, I think I'd like to do that in an environment that's a little bit more, even more chaotic, if that's possible.
I love that. You want more chaos in your life.
Yeah.
All right. We're debuting this episode on Halloween, so we have to ask, what is your favorite type of candy or sweet if you're not a big candy person?
Oh, no, this is an easy one. So Halloween is actually my birthday. So it has always been a favorite holiday. But there are 2 things that have to be in the trick-or-treat bucket for the kiddos, and they have to have a few tucked aside for me. And one is Milk Duds, and one is $100,000 bars. And I only eat them at Halloween, but it is not Halloween if we don't have them. And I already bought them for the year. So feel free to come knock on our door if you like $100,000 bars.
And finally, we are slowly approaching winter. What is your favorite thing to do in Michigan during the winter months?
We, during COVID, when it was so hard to be isolated from people, we bought a propane fire table, and we did a lot of outdoor entertaining in the winter. So we would bundle up, we would make hot cocoa or coffee or something and take blankets and parkas and whatever and sit around the table, but with that gorgeous, clear, starry sky and some good friends and the crackle of the fire. I think that was one of the highlights for me of sort of adjusting to the pandemic, is just relaxing with friends and finding a way to stay warm outdoors.
That sounds amazing. I think so. I'm coming over and we're hanging out
Perfect.
by the fire.
And bring some Milk Duds.
Yes, exactly. And $100,000 bars. Well, thank you so much again for joining us, Amy. Happy birthday. And
Thank
as
you.
we mentioned, this episode of The Wrap is part of a larger series that we're calling Caregiving on the Front Lines. If you want to check out the inaugural episode of that series with Dr. Helen Morgan, be sure you go to mmheadlines.org. That's mmheadlines.org.
Be sure to stay tuned to headlines later this week as the employee newsletter brings you a special Halloween-themed photo gallery and a recap of Quality Month festivities that were held throughout October. Find all that and more at mmheadlines.org.
All right, Bailey. So now, as we mentioned, of course, this is a Halloween edition of The Wrap. So I have to ask, are you a fan of Halloween in general? And looking back on it, what would you say is the best costume you've ever had?
I am a huge fan of Halloween, actually. I just love the fall in general, but Halloween's great. I have a twin brother, so my mom would always dress us up like in a costume together. And I think probably the most unique one we did was she dressed us as Shrek and Fiona, and she painted us all green. And my brother had the pillow in his costume, so big. It was great. I think that was probably one of my favorites and very unique.
Nice. So I don't know. Growing up, I never really was huge into Halloween, but there was a phase, in like high school and college, you have fun with it and you get dressed up and you have your parties at college and things like that. And the trend that I liked to go towards when I was in college was to go as like an inanimate object. I always found that more fun. So I know I've mentioned in the past, like I use a manual wheelchair to get around. And so for some reason, I thought it'd be hilarious to like go as a handicap parking sign. And so I did, like, I just turned myself into a handicap parking sign. So I just like try to find like one of the most random, like boring things you could ever think of and go as that. And it catches people off guard. And most people found it amazing. So that's what I would say was my favorite Halloween costume in the past.
I think you had me beat now for most unique. That was good.
I don't know. I like your idea though of having a twin brother. You got to have fun with that growing up, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's time for the weekly trivia contest. This week's question is, the organization recently launched an initiative to donate how many meals to food gatherers in Ann Arbor? Once again, the organization recently launched an initiative to donate how many meals to food gatherers in Ann Arbor. You can find the answer in headlines, and once you know it, send it to headlines@med.umich.edu for your chance to win a prize.
That's all the time we have for this week. Thank you so much again to Dr. Amy Cohn for joining us. And thank you, as always, to all of our listeners and viewers for everything you do for patients, families, and each other. We'll see you next week.